Sometimes when you know a person is going through some hard times, they feel obligated to say they're fine, even though they're not. It's a common thing to say, "How are you?" and people just say fine automatically. Because they most of the time when you ask someone how they are, you don't stop to take the time to listen to their answer. And they don't feel like you really care enough for them to be honest and say, "I'm really having a hard day." But if I stop and say, "How are you?" that means that I care enough about you to sit and listen. And sometimes it's cathartic just to have someone to listen and pray with you, that you know somebody cares and is willing to help you carry that burden. Because life is so hard sometimes that you can't take anymore, so you need something to take your mind off what is actually going on, give you a respite just for a moment. Then you can come back and deal with it. And that means I've taken your problem and internalized it and taken it to God who can do something about it. And then I'm helping you to carry your burden. Suddenly you don't feel so all alone. There's a difference in being alone and being lonely. And the reason it is not good is because in the beginning we remember that God is a triune God. And there's always been relationships. We were not meant to be alone. You remember the story of Adam when he was alone, and the Lord said, "It's not good for you to be alone." And he made him a helpmeet, someone that was like him, that was able to walk with him and be all that he was not. This is the way the Lord has made us. We don't all have the same gifts and talents, but we all have something. And when we use our gifts and talents, everyone use what God has implanted into them, suddenly the world is a better place to live. It's like cooking. If you're going to make a cake, you don't need all eggs. You don't need just sugar. You don't need just flour. You don't need just leavening. You don't need just butter. But when you put all those things together in the right proportions, suddenly you have something that smells good, doesn't it? Tastes even better. That's what life should be. All of us working together to make it all that God has meant it to be. Not just breathing, but enjoying the breath. By looking up at the trees and say, "Lord, you did a good job. Thanks for making that just for me." Isn't that exciting? To think he made this whole world, then he made Adam and Eve. After everything was ready, he didn't make them and say, "Got a problem. Maybe I'll make them someplace to stay." No, he made everything, and everything was beautiful and perfect. He kept saying, "And this is good." But when he made man, humanity, he said, "This is very good." So we are the apple of God's eye. And he doesn't want just one apple. Have you noticed he puts seeds in the apple? And one apple just makes a whole orchard. That's why we're not to be alone. That's why we need each other. And it means that we're not orphans. We can say, "Abba, Father." It's like saying Daddy. Suddenly we can go boldly to the throne of grace. That means that no matter what is going on in your life, you have access to help. You're not alone. To me, that is exciting. That means when my mother died, my father died, my husband died, I'm still not alone. For the Lord has told me he will never leave me nor forsake me. He will be with me always. And death is not the end. This life we're living now is only temporal. The life after death, death is a door that opens to all eternity. And in eternity, there is no end. That's why it's called eternity. It's like you have on each shoulder someone talking, and on this shoulder, you're getting negative things saying, don't listen, that's not for real. And on this shoulder, you're hearing someone saying, I love you this much. I love you right where you are. And you'll say, but I've done X, Y, and Z. He says, I love you, not the act, but the person. Not the act that you've done, but the actor. I love you. And there's nothing you can do about it. I love you. And see, that's why I'm saying we need to become better listeners. Sometimes we have to listen in the silence. Have you ever met anyone who's weeping, really crying? I mean, the shaking, weeping with the nose running. And you say, what's wrong? And they say, I'm all right. That's a sure sign that things are not well in Denmore. Things are not well. So sometimes what I do as a pastor and as a Christian is I'll just hold them. I won't say anything. Just hold them. And many times that's all they need, and let them cry. And when they get ready, they'll talk. But many times they've been abused and misused at work, abused and misused at home, abused and misused in the grocery store, in the service station. Everywhere they go, someone is hollering and screaming at them, and all they need is a kind word or a kind hand or just an arm to lay in for just a little while to know it's all right. I don't want anything from you. I just want to give you a little of my Jesus. Because, as Jesus walked on the water and Peter got up out of the boat and came to Jesus, when he started to sink, Jesus reached out his hand and picked him up. And he'll do the same for us. As we begin to sink, when we say, my Lord, help me, he says, I was here all the time waiting for you to ask me. And when you ask him, help me, he's so glad. He said, I thought you'd never